Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into one of humanity's most profound and persistent questions,
Hmm.
the enduring power of legacy.
It's a truly fascinating paradox, isn't it?
It really is. We all seem to carry this fundamental impulse, this need to leave something behind, to make a mark on the world.
Hmm.
But think about it for a moment. If you won't be around to see it, if you won't even remember it, why do we care so deeply about our legacy?
It's a huge question. And it's not just, a fleeting thought. It feels like this deep, universal human need.
Absolutely. It seems profoundly connected to our sense of purpose, to who we are. It gets right to the core of what it means to be human, really. This desire for your existence to resonate beyond your own lifespan.
It truly does. And for this deep dive, our mission is, well, to move beyond that common understanding of legacy. It's not just about individual theme or a personal inheritance of wealth or property.
Right, more than just the will or the name on a building.
Exactly. We're going to explore its multifaceted nature, trying to reveal how our actions reverberate through time, impacting generations we'll never even meet.
And we've pulled from a really diverse stack of sources for this one.
We have everything from rich philosophical debates to real-world business practices, incisive social commentary, and even ancient indigenous wisdom.
Quite a range.
Our goal is really to help you understand not just what legacy is, but why it matters on so many levels, personally, collectively, ecologically.
And crucially, how we can actively participate, right? How you can actively participate in shaping a better, more just future for those yet to come.
That's the aim.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We found a really provocative starting point, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this lively Reddit discussion. Someone posed a pretty bold question to atheists. Why do you care about legacy if there's no afterlife?
Wow. That's direct.
It is. It's a compelling question, right? If death is truly the final end of your individual consciousness, if there's no reward or recognition on the other side, why bother? Why try to leave a lasting mark?
Hmm. What stands out to you, listening right now, about the kind of answers people might give to that?
It makes you think.
Well, what's fascinating here is the sheer variety and depth of the responses people actually gave. Many were quite surprising, really thoughtful.
Okay.
For some, the motivation wasn't about selfish recognition at all, which is often the assumption, isn't it? About legacy.
Yeah, wanting your name remembered.
Right. Instead, they framed legacy as a direct contribution to human progress. A genuine, you could almost say selfless goal to further the advancement of the human race.
So less about me and more about us moving forward.
Precisely. It's about improving conditions, solving problems, laying groundwork for future generations. The whole recognition aspect becomes, well, irrelevant.
Like a scientist working on a cure.
Exactly. Imagine dedicating your life to researching a cure for a rare disease. Your drive isn't the Nobel Prize, it's the actual eradication of suffering. That's the legacy.
That's a crucial distinction, isn't it? It's not about having your name in lights or being remembered by everyone.
Not at all.
One commenter put it really well. Legacy isn't about recognition, it's fundamentally about accomplishment.
Accomplishment, yeah, I like that.
They use this powerful hypothetical. Imagine a cancer cure discovered by one person, let's call her Dr. Sharma, but then, through some mix-up or even theft of credit, it's publicly credited to someone else, say Dr. Carter.
Okay.
Even if Dr. Carter gets all the awards and fame, the commenter argued, it's still Anya's legacy because she did the work. She did the research that led to the cure.
Ah, I see. So legacy, in that view, is defined by what was done, the actual impact, not who gets the applause.
Exactly. It's almost like a scientific truth existing independently of who discovered it.
Precisely. The actual impact, the tangible change, that's the core. And for those who firmly believe death is final, that consciousness just stops.
Yeah.
Leaving a legacy is seen as the sole way for you to continue to exist in any form.
The only way. How so?
Well, your actions, your ideas, the ripple effects you create, in their view, that's the only continuity you have.
Yeah.
Everything we do, every choice has an effect, right? So we kind of live on through those ripples, through the lasting impact we make, whether it's an invention, art, or just, the positive influence you had on someone else. That's the only immortality available.
That's a powerful idea. And some even admitted, didn't they, that it might feel a bit irrational.
Yeah, some did. They acknowledged it might be an irrational desire, this need for legacy, yet it serves this profoundly powerful purpose, comforting the human condition against the inevitable, often terrifying reality of death.
Like leaving a little marker saying, I was here.
Sort of. leaving some kind of monument of existence, however small or obscure, to console yourself. It's not necessarily about whether others remember you forever.
It's more internal.
Exactly. It's about a deep personal feeling of having lived a life that was worth it when you look back from your deathbed.
Even if the contribution seems small to others.
Even something seemingly mundane, like making a sad person smile. Creating a moment of real connection, alleviating suffering. That could be a profound and fulfilling legacy from this perspective. The value isn't external validation, it's internal peace.
That resonates. It shifts the focus inward.
And delving deeper into that idea of continuity. One particular fascinating concept that came up was linked to Douglas Hofstadter's strange leap idea.
Oh, Hofstadter. Okay, tell me more.
Well, it posits that your very self, the essence of you, isn't just your physical brain. It's more like the software running on that hardware.
Okay, the mind as software.
Now, consider the implication. Just like software can be copied and run on other machines, your unique patterns of thought, your distinct ideas, when you articulate them, share them, write them down,
Yeah.
they can effectively be installed into the minds of others.
Whoa. Install. That's quite a metaphor.
It's more than a metaphor in this view. It's not just memory or influence. It's a dynamic continuation. Your ideas don't just echo. They can combine with others' thoughts, spark new connections, new interpretations.
Kind of producing a continuation or even a recreation of your state of mind.
Exactly. Long after your physical consciousness is gone. It's a truly revolutionary thought, transforming living on from just a saying into potentially a tangible cognitive reality, a unique form of intellectual immortality.
I find that incredibly compelling. The power of shared knowledge, intellectual inheritance, that a great idea can be passed down and keep evolving. And then there was another one, almost poetic. The law of conservation of kindness.
Ah, yes, that was a lovely one. It's this belief that positive actions, no matter how small, how seemingly insignificant.
Like dropping a pebble in a pond.
Exactly like that. They continue to affect the world in beneficial ways long after they occur. The ripples extend far beyond the initial splash, touching unseen shores.
An unseen chain of good.
It's about that quiet ripple effect that keeps on giving. This perspective implies that every act of generosity, every moment of empathy, contributes to this cumulative positive force in the world, subtly improving the human condition across generations.
So these personal quests for meaning, these individual reasons for caring about legacy, they seem to connect quite directly to a more intentional approach.
They do. It leads us nicely to Alan Seale's concept of being a steward of the future.
A steward of the future, okay.
He posits that the future belongs not to those who cling rigidly to their creations or their plans.
The control freaks?
Maybe. But rather to those who are creative, innovative, original, and crucially, willing to let their creations evolve beyond their initial imagination.
So letting go is key.
Letting go and serving a larger unfolding rather than controlling a fixed outcome.
That sounds like a powerful way to live. What exactly does it mean to be a steward in that sense? It suggests a real openness, a fluidity with change, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. A true steward of the future lives in service of that ever-evolving potential. They're completely unattached to specific forms or even the exact outcomes they initially envisioned.
Because things change.
Because things always change. They understand that nothing is fixed or permanent. Everything is part of this constant flow from what was to what is and what will be. We live in a constant state of becoming, always discovering ourselves and our world as it unfolds.
So it's about intuiting what's emerging.
Yes, intuiting the new world that awaits, maybe beyond our wildest dreams, and living in service of its unfolding, rather than trying to force it into some preconceived mold. It shifts you from being just a doer to being a partner with the emerging future.
That makes a lot of sense, flowing with what wants to happen, what's trying to emerge, rather than fighting it.
Exactly.
And we have some incredibly compelling testimonials from people who've experienced Alan Seale's Transformational Presence work, which is the framework for this stewardship idea.
Yes, those really bring it to life.
For example, Reverend Amy Gopp describes working with Alan not as typical coaching, but as an invitation to awareness. A gentle beckoning back to her true essence.
An invitation to awareness. I like that phrasing.
She emphasizes how he helped her learn to pay attention to what is emerging in the moment and partner with that energy. And that ultimately led her to claim her soul mission and see the world through, well, radically different lenses, fostering a deeper sense of self and purpose.
That sounds profound. And Suzanne O'Doherty shared a particularly powerful story too, didn't she?
Yes, about how Alan intuitively knew when she was at a breakthrough moment, even when she didn't realize it herself.
Wow.
He guided her through reflecting on her painting Windows on Change, just by asking these deep questions about its energy and messages.
Not telling, but asking.
Right. And this unique process helped her navigate the closure of a significant business site with newfound serenity and courage, allowing her to recognize and use her own inherent gifts more fully during a huge transition.
It really sounds like a deeply personal, almost spiritual journey sometimes, going far beyond what you might expect from regular coaching.
It really does. And another client, Shane Peterman, described how Alan's work helped him find his authentic self.
His authentic self.
Yeah. He now calls his soul mission, his compass, and his life vision, his roadmap. He uses them to vet every major decision, career, relationships, everything.
A personal navigation system.
Pretty much.
Oh.
He emphasized learning to listen to knowledge from within, this intuitive wisdom he describes as a constant source of fuel for his soul. It's not about quick fixes or outside advice. It's a profound internal shift in how you approach life's challenges, building resilience and clarity.
And the practical impact seems striking too, just in daily life. Iniki Rhinemakers noted it significantly reduced trauma and increased choice, commitment, and vitality.
More agency, less noise.
Yeah, and Santa Van Eekelen explained how it helped him bridge thinking with feeling, leading to this profound sense of inner alignment, a quiet mind, a relaxed body, and an inspired heart.
That sounds like a goal worth pursuing.
Doesn't it? And Daniel Karslake, an award-winning filmmaker, credited his work with Alan for giving him the clarity of vision and strength of conviction necessary to do my best work possible, directly impacting his creativity and success.
So these testimonials really show a holistic impact, mind, body, spirit. It demonstrates that being a steward of the future really starts with this deep inward journey.
Aligning your internal compass with the world's unfolding potential.
Right, shifting focus from just what you're doing to how you're being, the energy you bring. But what happens when we scale this up beyond our personal lives?
Good question.
What responsibilities do we, as a collective generation, owe to those who come after us? That leads us right into this critical and often tricky area of intergenerational equity.
That's a perfect segue. We're expanding the circle now from individual legacy to this broader societal concept, intergenerational equity.
Fairness across time.
Exactly. It's not just personal impact. It's about a just distribution of rewards and burdens, benefits and costs between generations. The core principle is simple, really. A person's inherent value shouldn't depend on when they were born.
Just like it shouldn't depend on nationality or gender.
Precisely. It's about ensuring fairness across time, recognizing that future generations have an equal right to a healthy planet and thriving societies.
That's a powerful statement, but it immediately brings up a critical and, frankly, uncomfortable issue.
Which is?
Well, right now, it looks like current generations are on a path unlikely to pass on a healthy, diverse environment. I mean, we're talking massive problems. Climate change, species loss, water degradation, habitat destruction.
That list is long and sobering.
It makes you wonder, why should we care about these future strangers who don't even exist yet? What obligation do we really have to them?
That's the cynic's persistent question, isn't it? What has posterity ever done for me? And it acknowledges a genuine psychological challenge. It is hard to care for potential people who aren't here, who can't reward or punish us. They can't vote, they can't protest, they can't even say thank you.
So why bother?
However, what's fascinating here is that despite their individual anonymity, future generations will exist. We know this with certainty.
Okay, they will exist.
And they will require fundamental resources: clean air, clean water, a stable climate, healthy ecosystems. We can be reasonably certain of their existence and their basic needs, even if we can't name them individually.
So that certainty forms a basis for responsibility.
It forms a foundational premise, yes.
So even though they can't speak for themselves, they still have a right to a healthy planet. It feels a bit abstract, but a right nonetheless.
Precisely. We can argue that future generations hold rights as a group or class of people, even if they're not individually identifiable yet.
How does that work, ethically?
Think about it. Morality, like justice, often applies universally, regardless of individual identity. Murder is wrong, regardless of the victim's name or background, right?
Sure.
This ethical framework, extending beyond specific identities to universal principles, can, and arguably should, extend to our duties to those not yet born.
And even if they can't claim those rights themselves?
Others can and do advocate on their behalf. Human rights organizations, environmental groups, even government representatives whose mandate includes future well-being. They act as proxies, giving voice to the voiceless.
And it's not just a philosophical idea, is it? You mentioned it's actually embedded in law in some interesting ways.
Indeed. We see this in international agreements, like the 1997 UNESCO Declaration on the Responsibilities of the Present Generations towards Future Generations.
What does that say?
It explicitly states our responsibility to ensure Earth isn't irreversibly damaged for future health and existence.
Okay.
And even national laws, like the U.S. National Park Act from way back in 1916. It charges the National Park Service with protecting natural spaces, quote, unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. Clear recognition of legal obligations.
So these legal precedents show a societal acceptance that our actions today have consequences way beyond the present.
Definitely.
That's a good point about the legal frameworks. But beyond laws and abstract rights, what about something more intrinsic, more human nature? Do we have deeper motivations for caring about the future?
Absolutely. I think it's deeply woven into the fabric of being human, to relate to others and care about the long-term well-being of society, its values, its institutions.
It's a bigger picture.
Yes, this desire to contribute to something larger than oneself, something that will endure beyond your own lifetime, it motivates countless people. Public service, education, science, arts, culture.
Right.
Most people would be deeply demoralized at the thought of Earth being utterly destroyed in, say, 200 years, even knowing they'd be long dead.
That's true. You don't want the story to just end.
Exactly. This shared purpose, this sense of contributing to an ongoing human story, helps individuals cope with their own mortality. It gives profound meaning and purpose. Some philosophers even suggest that a lack of such feelings, complete indifference to the future, indicates a kind of alienation from being fully human.
So it's almost an enlightened self-interest. It feels better to live in a moral community knowing you played a part, even if you don't see the final act.
Exactly. This leads right to the concept of enlightened self-interest and a kind of social contract across generations.
Like Rawls' idea.
Precisely. John Rawls' veil of ignorance is a useful analogy here. Imagine you didn't know which generation you'd be born into, present, past, or future.
Okay.
If you didn't know if you'd land in a resource-rich present or a resource-depleted future, you would rationally choose a system ensuring intergenerational justice, just to be safe, right?
Right, to guarantee fairness for everyone, including potentially yourself.
Exactly. This thought experiment highlights our underlying irrational desire for a just world for everyone, regardless of when they happen to arrive.
And the classic campsite analogy really brings this home, doesn't it? So simple, so powerful.
It does, universally relatable. Most people feel a clear moral obligation to clean up a campsite, not just for themselves, but for the unknown people coming next.
Because it's the right thing to do.
And because there's an understanding. If everyone does this, cleans up for the next person, who cleans up for the one after, then everyone benefits.
The system works.
Yes. And this applies directly to generations. We should leave sufficient resources and a decent environment for the next. It's basic reciprocity and foresight, even when the beneficiaries are unseen individuals.
This also connects to that ancient idea of common heritage or public trust, which has a surprisingly long history.
Indeed. Goes way back to Roman law. The idea that vital environmental resources, air, running water, the sea, belong to all humanity.
Not owned by individuals or states.
Not exclusively. They shouldn't be destroyed or controlled for private gain. This enduring principle even made its way into modern international law, like the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It affirms a collective obligation to manage resources for mankind as a whole.
So these fundamental resources are shared assets, a common inheritance, not just commodities.
Exactly. Not disposable commodities to be exploited without regard for their long-term health or availability.
And then there's the argument from power and knowledge, basically. With great power comes great responsibility, but on a global generational scale.
Precisely. Modern industrial nations, global corporations, with their vast capacity to impact the planet through technology and resource use.
They have a bigger footprint.
A much bigger footprint. And therefore, arguably, a profound moral responsibility for those impacts on future generations. When we know our actions, or even our inaction, can harm future generations.
Like with climate change or nuclear waste.
Exactly. Things with long-term implications. Failing to act responsibly today is ethically as blameworthy as directly causing harm. The fact that the consequences are distant doesn't diminish our responsibility now, especially when the science is clear.
So inaction becomes a choice with consequences.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It reinforces the idea that collective responsibility is crucial here because individual efforts alone just aren't enough for these planetary scale challenges.
All this really points to a fundamental truth, doesn't it? Our individual actions, our collective decisions today, they have this indelible impact on a future we won't personally inhabit.
But a future that will undeniably bear the consequences of our choices.
And it's not just individuals or nations. Businesses play a colossal role in this.
Which is where the concept of steward leadership in the business world becomes so profoundly relevant.
Right. And Ayala Corporation, that example from the Philippines, seems like a compelling real-world case. They were on that Steward Leadership 25 list.
They were. It highlights companies exemplifying a commitment to long-term value creation that goes beyond just short-term profits.
That's a huge achievement for such an old, large company. But for many listeners, steward leadership in a corporate context might sound, well, a bit idealistic or hard to implement. What makes Ayala different? What internal shifts did they need?
That's an excellent point. It's definitely not just superficial rebranding for them. Ayala adopted the definition of steward leadership as creating value by integrating the needs of stakeholders, future generations, and the environment.
Integrating those three. Okay.
This isn't just about maximizing shareholder returns next quarter. It's about a deep, ingrained, long-term orientation guiding strategy. It means recognizing the profound interconnectedness of all stakeholders, employees, customers, communities, the environment.
A wider view.
A much wider view. It involves being creative, resilient, and taking genuine ownership for the ripple effects of their actions. It required a significant cultural shift, prioritizing patient capital and societal impact alongside financial returns. Understanding that true longevity comes from relevance and trust, not just quick profits.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this philosophy isn't just theory for them, is it? How does this commitment translate into concrete actions? Can you give us some vivid examples?
Absolutely. A prime example is their venture into financial inclusion with Mint and its platform, GCash.
GCash, right. Huge in the Philippines now.
Huge now, but it wasn't a quick win. For many years, especially early on, GCash operated at a significant loss.
Really? They kept funding it.
They sustained it with unwavering commitment. Why? Because they recognized it was solving this massive, long-standing problem for millions of unbanked and underbanked Filipinos, giving them access to essential financial services for the first time.
So the focus wasn't profit, but long-term societal enablement.
Exactly. Building foundational infrastructure that would lift up entire communities. Today, GCash is a mobile wallet powerhouse, over 71 million users, transforming daily life for a huge part of the population. That's long-term vision paying off, socially and eventually financially.
That's a staggering impact. And it wasn't just finance, right? They applied this during the pandemic, too.
Absolutely. Another compelling example is AC Health, their healthcare arm. When COVID hit, AC Health didn't just focus on, keeping their own business afloat.
They stepped up.
They strategically deployed their vast resources, clinics, hospitals, pharmacies, telemedicine, to actively support the national effort against the virus. Their decisions prioritized national well-being and building long-term trust, even if it meant short-term financial hits.
Like with testing and vaccination.
They were at the forefront of mass testing and vaccination efforts, showing how corporate resources could serve the public good in a crisis. That commitment to societal health, even at a cost, is a hallmark of steward leadership.
And their involvement with that energy transition mechanism? That sounds genuinely groundbreaking, a potential blueprint.
It's truly groundbreaking. ACCENE, an Ayala subsidiary, one of the largest renewable platforms in Southeast Asia, collaborated with the Asian Development Bank on the world's first energy transition mechanism, or ETM, transaction.
Okay, break that down. What does ETM actually do?
Instead of just shutting down a coal plant, which can be really disruptive economically and socially,
Right, jobs lost, communities impacted.
the ETM provides a strategic financial pathway for its early retirement. And here's the ingenious part. The capital recovered from shutting down that plant, about $122 million in this case,
Yeah.
isn't just put back in the bank. It's reinvested directly into new, cleaner, renewable energy facilities.
Ah, so it funds the transition directly.
Precisely. This ensures a just energy transition. It not only avoids up to 50 million metric tons of CO2 emissions, but also provides crucial skills retraining and new job opportunities for the coal plant employees who'd otherwise be displaced.
That's the just part, addressing the human cost.
Exactly. It aligns with Ayala's net zero goals, cleverly converts investor exposure to coal into ESG-driven returns, and helps the community and environment. It's a win-win-win model. Cleaner, more equitable future.
So it's not just divesting, it's actively building something better. This connects so well to the whole global conversation around ESG, environmental, social governance.
It really does.
But critics often raise valid issues, right? Like greenwashing, questioning if sustainability reports are credible. How's that debate evolving?
Those are absolutely valid criticisms.
Yeah.
And that vigilance around transparency and accuracy is crucial. We've definitely seen companies make grand claims without real substance.
Just PR exercises?
Sometimes. However, the overall trend is overwhelmingly positive, I'd argue. Major investment firms like BlackRock, with Larry Fink leading the charge.
Right. His letters are influential?
Very. They now strongly advocate for stakeholder capitalism and robust ESG principles. Not just as ethical nice-to-haves, but as drivers of long-term financial performance, social progress, and environmental conservation. They see it as essential for managing future risks and attracting capital.
And we're seeing demand from consumers, too, especially younger generations. They care where their money goes, who they work for.
Absolutely. Younger generations are actively demanding to know how products are made, where materials come from, how companies impact society and the planet. Businesses aren't just profit machines anymore. They're expected to be responsible citizens.
So how do we tackle the greenwashing problem? Ensure accountability.
Well, significant efforts are underway to create more robust, standardized systems. We're seeing this with the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, and the detailed EU taxonomy for sustainable activities.
What do they do?
They aim to provide transparent, high-quality, and genuinely comparable ESG data, making it harder for companies to mislead and easier for stakeholders, investors, consumers, everyone to hold them accountable. Ultimately, a company's longevity and relevance are increasingly tied to its ability to adapt and generate genuine stakeholder impact, integrating diverse interests, evolving with the times.
It's clear the path forward for business isn't just about financial metrics anymore. It's about their broader impact, their commitment to the future, which brings us to a really thought-provoking concept.
Yes.
From the philosopher Roman Kruznerek, the colonization of the future.
Ooh, that's a strong phrase.
Isn't it? He argues that we've perhaps inadvertently treated the future like it's an uninhabited territory, a dumping ground for ecological damage, technological risks, basically our problems, with no thought for the consequences for those who will live there.
That's a powerful, almost unsettling idea, like historical colonization but projected forward.
Exactly. Krznarek highlights the profound ethical violation, particularly how it disproportionately impacts future generations, especially in the Global South, who will bear the brunt of climate change and environmental destruction caused largely by the historical actions of others.
So he sees it as needing an anti-colonial struggle for the future.
Yes. To assert the rights of these future generations, ensure their voices are heard, their interests protected, even though they're not here yet. The goal, he says, is to bring the voice of future generations into the room during today's decision-making.
How do you do that practically?
Through innovative mechanisms that force us to think long-term.
And what's fascinating here is how indigenous wisdom, with its deep connection to land and long-term thinking, is actually inspiring some of these practical solutions, ways to decolonize the future.
Like the future design movement in Japan.
Exactly. A prime example. It's directly inspired by the Native American concept of seventh-generation decision-making.
Thinking 7 generations ahead.
Right. Which is profoundly different from, say, quarterly reports. In future design experiments, they divide participants in planning sessions into 2 groups: present residents and 2060 residents.
Residents of the future. How?
The 2060 residents even wear ceremonial robes sometimes to help them psychologically embody that future role, feel the weight of responsibility to their descendants.
Does it work?
The striking outcome is that the 2060 residents consistently propose more long-term, bolder, often radically transformative decisions, prioritizing sustainability, systemic change over immediate convenience or short-term gain.
Wow. That's incredible. A simple shift in perspective yields such different results.
And it's spreading across Japan, cities like Kyoto, companies like Fujitsu, even the Ministry of Finance, and it's gaining international attention as a practical tool for long-term governance.
That's amazing. And speaking of indigenous wisdom, the #LandBack movement is tackling historical injustices head-on, rethinking stewardship in a way that's far from just symbolic.
Yes, a very important movement.
This raises an important question, though. What's the difference between symbolic gestures, like some land acknowledgments have become, and real tangible action for redress and stewardship?
That's a critical distinction. Hartman Dietz, a Mashpee Wampanoag scholar, really examines this. Land acknowledgments started as radical acts, non-natives, stating whose land they were on.
Acknowledging the history.
Right. But for some, he argues, it's become performative allyship that avoids concrete action. He quotes his teacher, Jessie Little Doe Baird, saying it can sound like, yeah, we stole your land, we know it, and we are keeping it, so what?
Ouch. That puts it starkly.
It does. It highlights the need for repair work, actual accountability, moving beyond symbols to tangible actions that redress wrongs and reshape relationships with the land.
So it's about shifting from just saying sorry to actually doing something, supporting tangible change, redistribution. How does that happen?
Precisely. Strategies include transferring land titles directly to indigenous trusts, forming robust cultural respect agreements, and genuinely involving Native people in land management and planning from the start.
Are there specific examples of this working?
Definitely. A really innovative one is the Shumi land tax from the Sogorea-Tel Land Trust in the Bay Area.
Shumi land tax.
Shumi is Chochenyo for gift. It's a voluntary, tax-deductible donation paid by non-indigenous people living on ancestral Olon land.
A voluntary tax.
Yes. And this direct funding bypasses bureaucracy to acquire land for indigenous communities more quickly, allowing them to rebuild cultural spaces, implement traditional land management.
That's a profoundly creative way to fund direct action, restorative justice in practice. And those cultural respect agreements, what do?
Groups like the Native Land Conservancy pioneered these. They formalize special access for indigenous people on conserved lands, recognizing their pre-existing rights for ceremonies, sustainable harvesting of traditional plants for medicine, cultural practices like hunting or gathering.
So it respects ongoing connection and use.
Exactly. It emphasizes that profound reciprocal connection. For Native peoples, the land is a teacher, not just a resource. It provides knowledge, language, food, medicine, identity. #landback, in its broadest sense, is presented as this crucial step toward decolonizing and repairing our relationships with the land and each other, for collective healing, ecological restoration, true liberation.
This brings us to a deeper, more abstract philosophical level. How do we assign responsibility not just to individuals, but to groups? This idea of collective responsibility, or CR. It feels intuitive sometimes, but philosophically, it's tricky.
It is indeed a real minefield. Collective responsibility usually refers to both the group's causal role in harm and the moral blame we assign them, unlike individual responsibility or shared responsibility where multiple people contribute.
CR treats the group itself as the agent.
Exactly. It attributes responsibility to groups as distinct moral agents for actions taken as collectives, not just adding up individual actions. We can also distinguish backward-looking CR, focusing on past harm, blame, maybe apologies.
And forward-looking.
Right. Forward-looking or remedial CR focuses on what a group can do now to fix harm and prevent it happening again. Less concerned with blame, more pragmatic about action.
Okay, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, the central philosophical debate is a big one. How can groups, without a literal group mind or consciousness, truly form intentions, act collectively, or be morally blameworthy? How do you blame something without a brain, basically?
That's the core challenge from methodological individualists. They argue only individuals have the free will, consciousness, intentionality needed for moral agency.
Like H.D. Lewis calling it barbarous.
Yes, that famous critique. Arguing it unjustly blames innocent individuals within the group. Their point is, actions start with individual intentions, and moral blame needs bad intentions or faultiness from the one responsible. If a group doesn't have a single mind, how can it have bad intentions or be faulty like a person can?
So it sounds like a fundamental hurdle for the whole idea of collective responsibility. How do defenders push back? How do they argue groups can be moral agents?
Well, one strategy is simply empirical. Hey, look around. We blame gurus all the time. David Cooper points this out. Blaming attitudes are directed at corporations, governments, nations.
It feels natural sometimes.
Right. And Deborah Tillerson talks about our reactive attitudes, anger, resentment directed at groups. She argues we can't just dismiss these as misdirected emotions. They reflect a legitimate moral intuition.
Okay, but philosophically, how do they build the case for group intention without a group mind?
Several ways. Michael Bratman talks about shared intentions. Individuals intend that we act, coordinating their meshing sub-plans with common knowledge. Think of a jazz ensemble.
Right, improvising together towards a common goal.
Exactly. No single conductor dictates every note, but each musician intends to play with the others, creating a collective sound. Their individual intentions mesh.
A networked intention, not a single brain, but still unified.
Precisely. Margaret Gilbert has her plural subject account. Group intentions exist when individuals are jointly committed to intending as a body. It's about the shared commitment. Raimo Tuomola talks about we intentions, where collective agency supervenes on individual agency, meaning it arises from and depends entirely on the members' intentions and perspectives. A group's intention to launch a product isn't some separate mystical thing. It's embodied in each person's commitment to that goal.
So the collective intention lives in the individual's shared understanding.
In a sense, yes. More recently, Christian List and Philip Pettit argue groups can meet requirements for moral agency by having representational and motivational states, like group beliefs and goals, and the capacity to act on them as a unit.
They even have conditions for group blame.
They do. A grave matter, serious harm, full knowledge of guilt, the group knew what it was doing, and full consent of the will, the group chose to act.
And it seems like beyond the philosophy, there are practical reasons we want to hold groups responsible. In law, in society.
Indeed, there are compelling positive consequences. Holding groups responsible can raise consciousness within them, force reflection on systemic issues. It acts as a deterrent, reinforces norms, sends a clear message about what's acceptable.
It incentivizes change.
Absolutely. Strong incentives for systemic change, institutional reform, pushing groups to restructure to prevent future harms. And, crucially, it makes clear to victims that their suffering is taken seriously. Provides validation that individual blame alone might not. List and Pettit say it helps us discern the true contours of the moral and political world.
Okay, so once collective responsibility is established for a group, then the really complex part starts. How do you distribute that responsibility within the group?
Yes, the distribution problem?
Peter French argues it's non-distributive, right? The group is blamed, but individuals still have their own personal blame for their specific actions. How do you untangle that?
It's truly thorny. Philosophers have proposed various frameworks. We could look at cases where many individuals are independently at fault, or where harm results from a joint undertaking or a pervasive common culture. Joel Feinberg's softer social blame.
Shared fault, common culture.
Right. Where collective liability arises from shared actions or attitudes, even if no single person caused the whole thing. Gregory Malema identifies 6 ways individuals can be complicit within a group.
6 ways? Like what?
Inducing the wrongdoing, counseling it, consenting to it, praising it, aiding it, or failing to stop it when they could have. This helps pinpoint degrees of individual responsibility within the collective.
That's helpful for breaking down complicity. What about individual freedom if someone's part of a harmful group but didn't choose to be or tried to resist?
Good point. That brings in the idea of voluntariness. Jan Narveson argues individual responsibility is diminished if membership is involuntary, like being born into a certain community held responsible for historical wrongs. You can't choose your birth.
Makes sense.
Conversely, there's broad agreement on the dissociation condition. Dissenters who openly resist harmful group actions, make their opposition known, should generally be exempt from collective blame, as Howard McGarry argues. Their resistance severs them from the group's harmful intent.
Okay, so dissent matters, but then there's that more controversial view. Metaphysical guilt. That sounds heavy.
It is. Philosophers like Karl Jaspers, Shio Rika, they put forward this unsettling idea. They argue even dissenters can be blameworthy if they're so embedded in a system implicating them in evil that they can't fully control it. Or if their opposition, paradoxically, inadvertently supports another harm.
Wow. That challenges the link between responsibility and individual control.
It really does.
Yeah.
Suggesting responsibility can extend beyond direct action or choice just from being part of a morally compromised system. It's unsettling because it implies culpability regardless of your personal actions within a deeply flawed structure.
This feels especially relevant when we talk about holding groups responsible for actions by earlier generations, like slavery, reparations. How can a current group be responsible for what happened long before they existed by people long dead?
This is a particularly thorny and deeply debated issue, as you can imagine. Fareed Abdel-Nour argues community solidarity can sometimes be enough, especially if there's strong cross-generational identification, pride in ancestors' deeds that implicitly accepts historical burdens too.
And Linda Radzik suggests just benefiting from past injustice could create responsibility.
Yes, particularly forward-looking responsibility. If a current institution, still profits from assets originally gained through, say, forced labor, a moral obligation to address that legacy arises.
But benefiting isn't the same as causing the harm. Right. You could argue you just inherited the good luck, not the guilt.
You're right, the distinction is crucial. Janet Thompson points out, benefiting doesn't automatically mean you caused it. However, it could imply responsibility for the prolongation of that harm, or its lingering consequences into the present and future.
So, not responsible for causing slavery, maybe, but responsible for addressing the ongoing systemic effects that still benefit some disproportionately.
That's the argument. And specific collective entities, states, corporations, organized religions are often seen as stronger candidates for historical responsibility. Why? Because their structures, decision-making bodies, belief systems, do continue over time. They have a continuity individuals lack, as Meviv McCune discusses regarding reparations. They aren't just collections of individuals, they are enduring entities.
Okay, so if a group is deemed responsible, what are the practical implications of actually holding them responsible? Because being responsible and holding someone responsible are different things, aren't they?
Very different, and the distinction is critical. Being responsible is a moral fact about what happened. Holding responsible is a social or legal act of accountability, publicizing it, often enacting consequences.
And the positive consequences of holding groups responsible.
They can be significant, raising consciousness within the group, deterring future bad behavior, reinforcing societal norms about justice, providing incentives for real systemic change, institutional reform, and, as we said, making clear to victims their suffering is recognized, which is vital for healing. List and Pettit argue it helps us see the moral world more clearly.
But there's a flip side, a very dark side to this concept as well. What are the potential dangers of attributing collective responsibility?
The primary concern is that paradoxically it might free individuals from personal responsibility, or lead to a kind of moral degeneracy, where people feel less accountable for their own actions because the group is blamed.
Undermining individual agency.
Right. Critics worry about eroding liberal ideals, even threats to democracy if collective blame gets too broad. Mark Grafe makes a grave warning.
What do you say?
He argues claims of collective responsibility have facilitated, if not motivated, heinous crimes throughout history, citing the Nazis' final solution, the Rwandan genocide, where entire groups were demonized, held collectively guilty, leading to horrific violence.
That's terrifying, that something intended for justice could be twisted like that.
It is. He argues it can undermine the very concept of responsibility itself by making people feel responsible even when innocent, diminishing the incentive for actual moral behavior. This is why the nuances, the definitions, the application are so incredibly critical.
Absolutely critical. And then there are the complexities of forward-looking collective responsibility. Prioritizing urgent global problems, climate change versus hunger, say, with limited resources. How do we make those impossible choices as a collective?
Exactly. These involve incredibly difficult value judgments, trade-offs, demanding careful ethical thought. The pragmatic approach admits we can't do everything at once. Our choices reflect our priorities and constraints. Which harms are most pressing? Which actions have the greatest impact?
Tough questions with no easy answer.
None at all. However, the emerging consensus seems to be that individual moral duties and collective action aren't mutually exclusive. They can be mutually supportive. Individual incentives, a strong personal sense of responsibility, can be crucial in forming the organized collectives needed, the NGOs, social movements, forward-thinking companies, to tackle huge harms like climate change. It's a dynamic interplay. Individual conscience sparks collective action, and collective action amplifies individual impact.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it feels like we're coming full circle, back to that profound wisdom of interconnectedness that weaves through all these threads.
It does feel that way.
Susan V. Bosak's definition of legacy really captures it, I think, an interconnection across time, like a young tree thriving by following the nutrient paths of older, unseen roots.
Beautiful image, highlighting our need for the past and our responsibility to the future.
Which brings us squarely to the importance of wisdom as a guide in shaping our legacy. It's not just about knowing things.
No, crucially, it's knowing what we don't know. Balancing knowledge with healthy doubt. Critically projecting the long-range, often unintended consequences of our decisions today.
Like that proverb, I will plant seeds to grow in springs I will not see.
Exactly. Wisdom encourages us to embrace the paradox, the uncertainty of life, to hold two opposed ideas simultaneously, like living fully now and planning for a distant future, and still function effectively. That F. Scott Fitzgerald test of first-rate intelligence.
So, making peace with the unknown future, but still acting with intention, almost with hopeful defiance. This also changes how we think about hope itself, doesn't it? It's not passive waiting.
It absolutely does. Hope, in this context, isn't a passive wait-and-see attitude. It's active, dynamic, an orientation of one's being.
Like Vaclav Havel said.
Exactly. Havel's profound statement. Hope is an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart that transcends immediate experience. It's not optimism that everything will turn out okay.
What is it then?
It's the conviction that something is moral and right and just, and therefore you fight regardless of the consequences. That kind of hope propels us into action, even when things look impossible, because the righteousness of the cause itself is motivation enough.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener, reflecting on your own life, your place in this unfolding story?
It really reinforces that idea. The personal becomes political, and how through legacy, me transforms into we.
In that partnership Edmund Burke talked about.
Yes, a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born.
We're all part of this larger human community, aren't we? Learning from history to build the future.
Constantly. Think about the roles. Children learn from the past, absorbing wisdom, stories, lessons. Adults have the active role of shaping and passing on a timeless part of themselves, experiences, ideas, values, personal example to create a better world for those who follow.
It's a continuous dance, living fully now, but with this conscious awareness of the uncertain but impactful future we're actively creating.
Recognizing our present choices truly are building tomorrow's world.
So, considering all these profound insights, individual and collective responsibility, that active, hopeful spirit of stewardship, here's a final thought for you to mull over.
What's the challenge?
What is one small, intentional action you can take this week to embody the spirit of a steward of the future? Maybe in your personal life, your community, your work. Remember, even a brief choice, a small act of kindness or foresight, can have an endless ripple through time.
A powerful thought to end on.
We'll leave you with that. Thanks for diving deep with us.